All right. Well, first of all, Michelle, I want to thank you for doing this interview. I know we were supposed to do it earlier, and we ended up not doing it for the obvious reasons, which I don't need to get into the gory details about. But the first obvious question is, how are you doing these days? How are your spirits? I'm like I'm happy to talk with you. You seem like you're in a good mood.
It's because I was crying all morning.
Oh, I'm
I
sorry.
got it out. I'm okay. I mean, it changes by the hour, honestly. Some days I'm good and some days I'm not. So it just depends.
Yeah.
It's nice to have work to distract me.
Are you in the studio, the home studio right now where you recorded this record?
I am. This is our home studio in Nashville, and this is where it happened.
Well, like I said, I definitely want to talk about what happened, not what happened, but not gory details, but obviously, you doing this interview from the space where this record was made. I imagine what's, transpired in, recent weeks has kind of thrown some of this record into a new light for you. Can you tell me, like certain songs, certain lyrics, etc.?
Yeah, it's weird. I've been able to kind of compartmentalize the album and what's been going on recently. I I feel like our my creative working relationship with Patrick is something that I really value, and I still, that's not tarnished, and what we worked on together isn't tarnished. He's always been such a huge advocate and supporter of me in that regard. So I have been able to kind of separate it. And it's funny, some of these songs were written. There's a song that was written as late as 2011 on this record, and half of the record was written
20
back.
2011 or
Yeah,
2021?
2011.
Oh,
There's
early. Wow.
yeah, there's a song written then. I would say half the record was written in like 2017. So it's funny that as this record's coming out, a lot of people have been curious if some of these songs were recent, but they aren't. And it's funny how
Mm.
music can kind of happen that way. There's just the other day I was rehearsing Goodbye to You, and I was thinking of the line, "The last 3 years were just pretend," and that line hit me like like a ton of bricks.
Sorry.
Um, it's just one of those things that music just songs will change meanings here and there. And I'm sure these songs will find, as I go out and on tour and start playing them, I'll find new meanings from what I wrote them about.
See, it's interesting because, obviously I made the assumption that they were recently written songs and maybe songs about what was going on in your personal life in 2020 or 2021. And like I said, I was a little pleasantly surprised that this interview got rescheduled. But I actually at one point wondered if you would even put this record out, or maybe you'd delay it, or maybe you'd go back into the studio you're in now and retool some things in light of the circumstances. Did that ever cross your mind? It sounds like you're very much at peace with the Trouble with Fever as it is.
Yeah, if anything, I finished this record in 2020, and have been sitting on it for so long. I was going to release it at some point. It was going to be released, and then I found out I was pregnant with my daughter Willie. So then it got pushed back again. So for me, it's just like a snapshot in time, and I want it out.
Mm,
Uh, Although I will say, like, sitting on finished material has never really been the easiest thing for me to do. Like, there's a song, the opening title of the record is called Closest Thing to Heaven. And I've since written like a whole other chorus part for it that I'm like, I wish I could go and
mm,
work on the song again and re-record it. But um, I think I'm just happy to make creative space for the next thing. Release
mm.
this, start focusing on the future.
Well, you spoke positively of the professional or creative relationship you had with Patrick, and I know he worked on your previous record. It's actually in the press materials for The Trouble with Fever about how he brought up a confidence that I'm kind of surprised you didn't already have, or that you lost or whatever. Can I assume that the two of you won't work together again, or what will the next record look like, or will there still be a professional relationship there?
I don't know. I mean, he's the father of my children. I love him very much. I think in a perfect world, we'll figure out a way to make it work. I don't know. I mean, it's just still so fresh and so raw. But there's like a deep friendship at the basis of our relationship. So hopefully that will still be there regardless of what happens in our marriage.
Well, that's awesome to hear. Well, let's go back to 2020 when you made this record. Obviously, it sounds like despite what was going on with the garbage fire outside in the world, you were in kind of this safe space, and it was kind of an idyllic and creatively fertile time in your home studio working together. Can you tell me about the circumstances under which this record was made? Because I feel like maybe you weren't even planning to do a record; it sort of just organically came out.
Yeah, we have this amazing studio here at our house in Nashville, and we started the record in March of 2020. And really just because there had been this massive pause button on all of our lives, that I was able to actually just come in here and start working. Patrick was meant to be on tour that entire summer. My son was here at the house, and he was he was only not even 2 years old yet. So it was kind of one of the ways that we coped with being in lockdown, was like, okay, well, let's go through and see what songs we haven't finished, and let's go through and let's just work. And it wasn't a project that was started as a Michelle Branch record. It was just like, hey, let's go in and finish these songs. And then it kind of became evident as we kept working on song after song, like, oh, okay, this is my next record. And it was interesting because nobody was expecting a new album from me. To kind of like sit on this was exciting. I was like, I know something you guys don't know. I have a finished record. So to have it finally come out is really exciting for me.
You take a lot of time between records. The previous one was 2017, I think, and maybe the one before that was 2010 or something like that.
It's not on purpose, believe me. My favorite part of what I do is being in the studio. I love working in the studio. It's never been my intention to have music sitting for so long. So hopefully you'll hear new music sooner rather than later.
Well, it's interesting because, like I said, in the press materials for The Trouble with Fever that I was sent several weeks ago in preparation for this interview, obviously Patrick's name is on it as a co-producer, but I'm under the impression that you took creative control, took the reins in a way that maybe you never had before on this record.
Yeah. I feel like, ironically, the last time that I had this much say in an album was on The Spirit Room, was my first record. When I wrote most of those songs back then on my own in my teenage bedroom. And this record, because of what was happening in the world, I didn't have any co-writers. I didn't have any session musicians I could call down to the studio and play. And there were times when I would say to Patrick, hey, I have this idea for this part. And I would try to explain it to him, and he would say, think about what the sound is. Think about what you're trying to say. Like, how do you communicate this? And I had never been in that spot before, because I'm so used to calling, Greg Leese to come down and play pedal steel, or, calling John Shanks to come play a guitar part, and I would just hum the part and they would do it. And so it was the first time I rolled up my sleeves and was like, okay, I'm going to do this. And some parts took a lot longer to find, and some parts like opened up a whole new world. And I was like, okay, here, I found it. But it was great to know that I can do it. And I don't know if I necessarily want to like turn around and now start producing records, because a lot of pressure, but I know now that I can. And I can't believe it's taken me 39 years to figure that out.
Oh my God. I'd like to talk a little bit more. I mentioned how there were times when you didn't feel confident, and you've talked before in the past about how Patrick with this record and the previous one brought that out in you. So I in general want to know why you wouldn't have why you would have had any kind of crisis of confidence given
Yeah.
all of your achievements from a very young age.
There was a period of time when, after the records broke up, I had turned in a solo record, at the time to Warner Nashville, and it kept getting kind of put on hold, or put. It ended up ultimately getting shelved, but it kept getting bounced back over the period of like 3.5 years. This finished record, and that process really took a beating to my confidence as far as writing. I started second guessing. I was sent out on co-writing date after co-writing date with people, and started to go like, oh, can I not do this on my own? It was it really, really shook my confidence to the core. And it took a long time for me to kind of get over that. And that was kind of the longest period where I didn't have music released. And it was weird to have so much success and then have it all kind of just stop. And it took me a long time to kind of work through that. There's a song on the new record called When That Somebody Is You. And it's kind of about this, how we're our own worst critic, and how you have that inner voice in your head telling you, you're not good enough, or you can't do this. And how hard it is sometimes to just show up for yourself. And that's been something I've definitely learned, over the last decade.
Yeah. Is that experience you were talking about, the solo record after the records, did that record come out in a form that you were happy with?
The record that ended up coming out was just an EP called Everything Comes and Goes. It was 6 songs of like 12 that I ended up recording, and I'm kind of hopeful that that record will see the light of day, as intended. I have it's a really great record, and I know that it exists online for people who are like diehard enough to find it. So yeah, who knows? I just think it's a shame when an artist has to sit on material, or when stuff doesn't get released. It's, for me, as you were asking earlier about this record, about shelving it, I would just rather have it out and move on, as opposed to it never getting to be heard, especially when so much time and care was taken in making it. So yeah, it really shook me to just keep turning in music and keep being told like, no, it's not right, or no, it's not, it can't come out for various reasons. So here we are. Everything happened.
Was there a change at your record label at that time or something? Because given the fact that you'd had massive success at a quite young age, right out of the gate, with an album, The Spirit Room, that had your stamp all over it, like, I don't understand why they'd be like, okay, that worked, let's not do that, or, let's change it. You know what I mean? It doesn't make sense.
I feel like I was cursed, because I turned in the record, and when I turned in the record, there was a change of label heads. So new people would come in, and the team that I worked with for 10 years was all let go, and suddenly new people were brought in, and with new people comes like, oh, you should try this, oh, you should try this, and you go and you try it and you turn it in and you work on it, and then new people would come in, and another label head got fired. It was crazy. So I was kind of stuck in this kind of limbo because of just record industry stuff. And at the end of the day, it's a shame that it never saw the light of day. But I did have the president at Warner Nashville, actually, we ran into each other a couple years ago, and he told me, he was like, I still, that record, I love it so much. I wish that I had just released it when you turned it in. Apologized to me for keeping it hostage. So I don't know. I'm optimistic that now I'll be able to kind of release those records and let them be heard.
I'd certainly love to hear them myself, but you seem optimistic in general, which I'm happy to see. But a little bit of a loaded question, but given that you had, crises of confidence in the past, and I'm on, the last couple records that you did with Patrick sort of boosted that. It sounds like you're already looking ahead to what your next record will be, which is exciting to hear. But like, Are you experiencing any self-doubts or anything again now, in light of the fact, of what has happened with someone who was, a personal
Yeah.
stuff aside, a professional collaborator?
I I would say I therapy is incredible. And I find a lot of solace in therapy and in doing the work. And so if anyone is out there and waiting for a sign to talk to somebody, go talk to somebody, because it's taken me 39 years to start going to therapy.
Oh,
Um,
so it's
found
recent.
it's recent, and I find it incredibly helpful. So I feel like I'm in a better place now than maybe if I was in my 20s and this had happened, because I don't know if I would have reached out and talked to anybody else about it besides, my friends or whatever. But I am my friends were laughing because I was like, you guys, I'm obsessed with therapy now, and I think I could go every single day. So yeah, go talk to somebody.
Fun fact, I just started going to therapy like 2 weeks ago, literally never before. And I agree
Yeah,
with you. Like, why didn't
yeah,
I do this before? It's almost
right.
like maintenance on the car. Even if like your life is okay, it's not a bad thing to get checkups. You know what I mean?
Exactly. You said it perfectly. I think for so long you think like, oh, it's not bad enough for me to go to
Mm,
therapy. I'll deal with it. I'll deal with it. And that stuff builds up. And sometimes there's days where I'm like, oh, what am I going to even talk about today? And then I get in therapy and, I'm running the clock and I'm like, where did that come from? So
every time I do therapy, they're like, well, our time is up. I'm like, wait, what? Like they asked me one question and I talked for like half hour. So like I totally get it. Are you using music like songwriting at the moment as therapy? Of course, I want to talk more about the trouble with fever, but like it sounds like you're already looking ahead to what you might do next now that this chapter is over. Are you writing about what's going on in your life or what has gone on in the past in your life?
I haven't had the luxury of writing yet. I've been gearing up to go on tour, and
Oh,
my son is homesick from school today,
oh,
so
I'm
I have
sorry.
I have
Thanks for
real
doing this interview with all that going on.
um I haven't had a moment to myself to kind of I feel like I have a bunch of songs in the waiting room just waiting for me to just have a minute to pay attention. And ironically, I think I'm going to have more time to do it on tour when I'm away, like when I can be apart from the house and away from the kids and have time to focus on it. I'm sure it'll come pouring out. At least that's how I feel right now.
So, well, one of the songs I definitely wanted to ask about from going back to the trouble with fever is I'm a Man. Because that song, hit. I don't know if it hits different for you now, but like it hits in a great way. I definitely, with everything going on in the world in general. Can you tell me a little bit about the inspiration of that song?
Yeah. I'm a Man was written in March of 2020. It was one of the first songs written for this record, or of the new material written for the record. And I I oftentimes just kind of hum gibberish to melodies till they kind of form lyrics. And I kept coming back to I'm a man, I'm a man. And I was like, why can't shake this lyric? Like, what do I know about being a man? And the phrase toxic masculinity was being thrown around a lot. And I started thinking of the pressure that men do have to, put a roof over someone's head, take care of a family, and all of the different obligations of what it means to be a quote unquote man.
Mm,
Uh, and then I started thinking about how it feels to be a woman on the other side of that coin, and everything that we have to deal with, and how far we still have to go to even be equal. Um and I feel like a lot of people were asking if I had written it more recently because of the timing of it being released, with the overturn of Roe v. Wade. And it wasn't written recently. And, this has been going on for a long time, unfortunately. And here we are in 2022. And this is still up for debate. It's kind of, it's shocking. It doesn't make any sense. I'm a mother of 3 and I'm nearly 40, and I can't make decisions about my body, and that makes me pissed off. So that's what that song was written about. And also I remember being in the studio when I first came up with the chorus, and I was singing it into the microphone, and Patrick was at the board, and he's like, "What are the lyrics? What are you saying? You can't just like trash half of the people on earth." And I was like, "No, I don't. It's like trashing people. I have empathy for like the pressure of what it must be to be a man." But in the same sentence, like, men, come on, show up for us. Like, where are you?
Yeah.
Help us out.
Absolutely. On the subject of toxic masculinity, I was wondering if any of that, is based, we're going back, you're talking about some early struggles you had in your career post Spirit Room. And, I'm just wondering, as a young woman in the business, if you ever dealt with that, not necessarily anything on a Me Too level, although that might be the case, but just sort of being condescended to or not taken seriously because you were a young woman in the business, and also pitting you against other artists. I remember that it was like a big thing to call someone like the anti-Britney or the anti this because they were brunette or because they played a guitar. I don't know. There was a lot of toxicity going on. And have you experienced any of that? And did that play into the sort of ebbs and flows of your confidence?
I think that being a young female in this business, in a male dominating business, was there were many times where I felt like I couldn't speak up, or I was ganged up on in a way that I felt like I couldn't say no to certain things. And that goes from early on, from the Spirit Room, of just, I remember there's 2 covers on the Spirit Room. There's one that's blue and there's one that's red. And I got in a disagreement with the label head at Maverick about the record cover. And I was called into his office and told, like, "No, this is the better record cover." And I was like, "I don't like this picture of me. I don't want it on the cover of my record," and was made to have it as my album cover. So the minute that the Spirit Room sold 1 million copies, I went into the office and I was like, "You're changing the album cover to the album cover I want." So just little dumb things like that. I was a teenage girl and being told, like, "No, this is the cover for your album." Like, that's insane. That would never have happened to a guy, ever.
100%. Did you ever experience, given that you were coming up in that Britney era, the TRL, Total Request Live era, was there any attempts by record labels, whatever, or photographers, or to sexualize you, make you wear something, or do a video that was way sexier or just not you than you felt?
Then,
Yeah.
I remember I was on set for the music video for Breathe, and I had just gotten home from a tour in Japan, and I was so jet lagged, and had a fitting at my house for the Breathe video. And they showed up with all these like leather bustiers and didn't want me to play guitar, wanted me to have a choreographer and dance, which, by the way, if you've ever seen me dance, you would know that that is not the way to sell records. And I was so angry about it. And I was like, "No, I'm not going to be wearing that. I don't feel comfortable. Definitely not going to do a dance routine. I'd rather play a guitar." I got into such a massive fight with the video director that I ended up leaving the set of Breathe the next day and saying, like, "I'm not going to come to set if you're going to be expecting this of me. Like, I hired you to direct the video. You did not hire me as an actress. Like, this is my music." So there were definitely moments that I had to deal with. And the difference is, like, if a man was in that situation, I feel like when a female's in that situation, you're suddenly difficult, you're a bitch, you're hard to handle, whatever. But bringing this back to Patrick, like, sometimes Patrick would hear these stories that I have, and he would be irate, and he'd be like, "That would never happen to a man." that's not fair.
Well, I'm
And
glad
it's
you, yeah, I'm glad you would support him that way. Actually, this wasn't a question I was planning to ask, but I'm wondering if when you started to, put out records in the last few years after taking such a long break, unfortunately, there is a fallacy that happens a lot of times when a woman works with a famous man, a male producer. Shania Twain and Mutt Lange is an example that comes to mind just because I actually just recently interviewed Shania and we talked about that situation.
the queen.
Yeah, she's
I love.
amazing. And we talked obviously about the fact that she had been, married to her producer and, obviously divorced him. Did you struggle with any people kind of thinking that, like, obviously it's not the case, but that like Patrick was like Svengali-ing you or like writing these songs or like, he was kind of like you're a Stars Born, guy, you know what I mean? Like I could see how there might be some people that would think that, and that would obviously not sit well with you.
Yeah, I fortunately haven't felt that with Patrick.
I mean,
Although,
more like the media portrayal, not
yeah,
him.
I guess it is. We are so intertwined creatively that I could see it happening. I don't feel that that's happened. I feel like that happened more to me when I was younger and like working with my dear friends, John Shanks. He's like family to me. And I feel like that was often kind of the thought when I was working with John, because John went on to work with so many younger females in
Yeah.
this genre. It was kind of like felt at some moments like I was part of this like machine of John Shanks, like ingenues, and that wasn't the case. We're all definitely there with our own talents and for our own reasons. And John remains to this day one of my closest friends. So yeah.
Is that fallacy that happened back then with the ingenue stuff and all that, was that a big reason why you took a little bit of a career detour with the records? I remember obviously the records was successful and awesome. I imagine a lot of people were surprised at that time that you did that.
Yeah, you actually hit the nail on the head. When I decided to do the records, I remember people who I worked with kind of being in shock that I wanted to take such a detour at the height of my career. And they didn't really understand. And I just wanted to feel like I had a little bit more creative control over stuff. And I was kind of expected to just go back in the studio with John and spit out another record. And that was leaving me creatively feeling a little bit, I just wanted more. I wanted to push myself. And so the records was kind of my answer to that. Although ironically, I ended up working with John on the big single from the records record, Leave the Pieces. We asked him to do that at the last minute and it ended up being a huge hit. So
would you consider doing another records album, or looking ahead to your next album? Some obviously there's country elements in what you do already and you're in Nashville, but like a straight up country album?
Making another records record has been on my to-do list for the last few years. We Jessica and I rekindled our friendship back in 2017. I asked her to come sing a few songs with me at the Nashville show, and you can't fake chemistry like that. She came up and sang, and it was just like instant. It just fell back into place. And she and I talked about getting together to write when that tour was over. And then I found out I was pregnant with my son, and she then found out she was pregnant with her daughter. So we put the music on hold for motherhood, and said, let's get together in 2020 and work. And then, that. So now that this album is flying the nest, I'm hoping that I can go write with Jess and we can explore that. It would be such a joy to me to make another records record, which I think if you had asked me, years ago, if I'd make another records record, I would have said, no, I don't see how it's possible. But now I'm happy to say, like, yes, she and I hopefully will work together again one day, hopefully sooner rather than later.
I'd love to see it. It's interesting since you mentioned the whole like putting a career on pause for motherhood. it seems like, you know, when we talk about like the differences between men and women in the business, it seems like that doesn't happen as often or isn't as expected as often of
Yeah.
male artists. Do you have any thoughts about that, especially since you just very congratulations had another child very recently?
Yeah, I think it's really being able to see Patrick going out on the road right now and struggling with the fact that he's not home and not able to see the kids as much has given me a new perspective of what it must be like to be a male leaving your family. It's hard. I mean, there are days when my son, who just turned 4, is like in tears, like, I want daddy to be home. Like, why does daddy have to play concert? Then um, it sucks sometimes. um, and I'm getting ready to leave in less than a week on tour, and I'm going to bring my daughter with because she's 7 months and I'm still breastfeeding, and I'm going to leave my kids with the nanny, and Patrick will be in and out from tour, and grandparents come in. It like truly takes a village. um but yeah, I do feel like, I put this record on hold because I found out I was pregnant, and I I didn't want to have to promote a record while I was pregnant and feeling that way. So there are a few times in my life, 3 times, 3 times in my life where I've had to pause things
Mm,
because of that. You know what? I'm wouldn't change it for the world. I'm so happy that I am able to be a mom and also have this very enriching creative life. Some days it's easier to balance and some days it seems impossible. But years ago, I was on tour opening up for the Dixie Chicks when I was, gosh, I think I was like 19 or 20. And I saw them doing this huge, massive tour with, I think at the time they had like 7 kids between the 3 of them. And they had nannies and a backstage room with all the toys for all the kids. And they made it work. And it was the first time that I had seen musicians at their level touring and also managing motherhood. And it was really inspiring to me. And I feel like during the pandemic, a lot of female musician friends of mine decided to take the plunge and have babies and start that road down and become mothers. And it was that pause that enabled people to say, you know what, I'm going to do this now. And so normalize musician motherhood, I guess.
speaking of normalizing and breastfeeding, because you just mentioned it, weren't you like, you're very vocal on your social media, which I super appreciate your candor both that way and as we're speaking now, but didn't like someone like shame you for breastfeeding or something? You went on like Instagram about it. What happened exactly?
It was really crazy. My daughter was 6 weeks old and I was like venturing out on a neighborhood walk. We had a house in Charleston, South Carolina, and I went to the park around the down the street from our house. And my son wanted to play at the playground and he's off playing at the playground. And I find this kind of bench out of the way to feed my 6 week old. And I had my stroller in front of me and I had a cover, but it was like 90 degrees outside. And I was like, I'm boiling. I kind of took my cover off and I'm feeding her very discreetly. And a mom across the playground just would not stop staring at me. And she was holding a baby. And I was like, oh, there's another mom. Like maybe she wants to be mom friends. Like, come on.
Oh,
She came over to her 2 older daughters that were playing on the play structure near me and said, girls, get your shoes on. We're leaving. And she was right behind me and she was like, she's not being modest. We have to go. And I was in shock. I just could feel my face getting hot. And I was like, is she directing this at me? Like, there were so many things that bothered me about the interaction. The main thing was that she was telling her daughters that what I was doing was not okay. And here I am feeding a 6 week old and at a park with mothers and children. I just didn't expect it from another woman.
that's what I
And
was thinking, is we've been talking so much about men being uncool or toxic, whatever, but it's even weirder when it comes from one of our own. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
I think motherhood is so hard as it is. Like, to be made to feel that way by another mom was really upsetting. And it was one of those things where like she left and I couldn't believe that I didn't say anything back because I was just kind of in shock. And I kept saying like, oh, I can't wait to run into her at the park again because I want to talk to her. And I never ran into her again. And it was, I was like, when I got home from that, I was like shaking and I was like, you will not believe what just happened to me at the park. That was so upsetting. But it's just like, what do you think? What do you think boobs were made for, people?
Yep.
Like, are you that upset that I'm breastfeeding at a park? Like, it's not like I was like topless or flaunting. I was really trying to be as modest as I could. And it was so upsetting.
Well, I'm sorry. I hope that she saw your Instagram since you never ran into her at the park and saw her get called out and paid attention to that. To bring it back to music, to wrap it up, obviously you got the Trouble with Fever coming out. You're looking at, we sort of talked about what might come next and possible records reunion. What else is on your to-do list? You have creative control now. You kind of are starting a new chapter of your life in different ways. What do you want to do next?
I think I haven't really thought much past getting through this tour. And right now I'm like, I have to pack. Like, what am I going to wear? What's the set list order? What do I have to pack for? I'm bringing my daughter with, and there's anxiety around that of like trying to balance all of that. But I would say that it's making new music. I don't know who I'll be making it with, but it's definitely, I feel like it's time to get some of this stuff out on paper. So that's what I'm really looking for.
I cannot wait to hear that. I'm obviously very curious. I want to thank you again for doing this interview, given,
Of
all the
course.
things going on in your life. It was wonderful to speak with you. And I guess the last final question I'll say is, as you're about to put this record out, made in one circumstance, amid what's going on with you now and the news cycle and all that, like, where, no pun intended, where's your spirit at? Like, how are you feeling? Are you feeling good? Are you feeling strong?
I I'm feeling strong for the shows. That's what's getting me, kind of keeping me going. And there is an excitement about getting back on the road and playing those shows. But I'm like, hopefully I won't like lose it and start crying on stage somewhere. But
Well, if you do, the fans will totally rally around you, as they have been. So it's
confident
okay.
everyone will sing along and be there to support.